Hey, it's Mythic Mike. We're back with another public service announcement showing you how to crush temporary lockdown, the plague on all aggro players. It puts all things with mana value 2 or less underneath it, and you have to kill it to get it back. It's a nightmare because it's hard to kill enchantments. It was not very good in Bloomburrow, but now there's a new Bunny token forge deck, and they play 4 copies. So it's back with a passion, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to beat it in every single color. Let's get into it. First, with white, one of the colors with a lot of options, which is interesting because temporary lockdown itself is white. We have Requisition Raid, a card you might not have really played, but is worth considering in certain aggro decks. It is a 1 mana sorcery, sorcery being worse to kill temporary lockdown because that means it goes off and it'll permanently kill all your tokens, right? An instant speed spell, you can actually kill it as they play it, and then you don't lose anything. The tokens don't get killed. It doesn't go off. Everybody's happy. So sorcery speed's a bummer, but it has some added benefits here. The versatility is insane because it's spree, so you can pay 1 more to do any of these, 2 more to play 2, and 3 more to play all 3. Destroying an artifact, enchantment, and putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. So the best way to do this with temporary lockdown is to play it in a small aggro creature deck. Obviously that gets crushed by temporary lockdown, but we have 4 of these. We play for 3 mana, we play the 2nd and 3rd chapter, destroy target enchantment, and put a +1/+1 counter on all our creatures. How the triggers work, guys, if you don't know, is it'll kill temporary lockdown, you'll get back all your creatures that are under it, and then they'll all get counters. So super interesting play pattern that is worth considering in certain low to the ground aggro decks. Get Lost, the best way to deal with it, guys, by far. Get Lost is just nasty. I used to not love this card because you have to give them 2 maps. This destroys target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, not artifacts, and you give them maps. That was from an old meta, though, where everyone just played a bunch of creatures. No one played this combat trick deck, you know, the slick shot show-off deck where you play a bunch of combat tricks on the same creature. The reason why that matters is you give them 2 maps, but you blow them out because they played, 1 to 3 combat tricks on a creature. So they're getting 2 or 3 for 1 as well. And we just gave them a couple maps. Similarly, if they took 3 of our creatures with temporary lockdown, it's more than, a good trade to give them 2 maps for that. So we're just in a different meta where this actually hits what it needs to, including instant speed, temporary lockdown. Let's go. Sunder the Gateway, another interesting one you might not have heard of. 2 mana sorcery, so that's a bummer. But you can choose one, destroy target non-token artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Incubate 2, make a little non-land permanent. Incubate token for 2, you bring it and it's a 2/2. Or you just incubate 2 and transform it so you get the 2/2 if they don't have a non-token artifact or enchantment that you want to kill so it's not dead. This is interesting. It's worth considering in decks where tokens matter, where non-land permanents matter. Certain decks, good to know it exists. Similarly, this is not amazing, but, reasonable. They've got a couple of these, but this is probably the best one for white. 3 mana enchantment, it has ward 3, and when it enters, exile any non-land permanent, right? Until this leaves the battlefield. So the only reason I put it in here is the Orzhov Bat for 2 mana can bring back non-land permanents with 3 mana or less. So, I've been playing around with a bunch of decks with that, and this is interesting in that shell. Realistically, Get Lost is the best way to deal with temporary lockdown, probably in any color, but definitely in white. And Requisition Raid is an interesting pick that sometimes could be better in a low aggro deck. On to green, which is actually another one, just has so many options to kill temporary lockdown, which is awesome because green has a lot of low to the ground creatures. One thing to keep in mind as I'm going through this, you only really need 3 to 4 ways to deal with it. You don't have to put everything in. They only have 4 temporary lockdowns. Additionally, if your color doesn't have a bunch of ways to deal with temporary lockdown, mix it with some green or some white, which is why multicolored decks are so great. Additionally, since temporary lockdown has recently come into the meta again, relook at some decks, including ones I made, where you might be getting crushed by temporary lockdown now, and you can just add some of these to make it better and deal with the current meta. But first, Haywire Might, insane. I'd say the best ways to deal with temporary lockdown are Get Lost and Haywire Might. This is a good card now. Everyone should be rethinking it. 1 mana, artifact, insect, 1/1. When it dies, gain 2 life. 1 green mana, instant speed, sacrifice Haywire Might, exile, which is important in some situations. Target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Will kill the sagas. You'll kill that bunny token deck that has temporary lockdown. You'll kill the forge for 1 mana. Let's go. It'll kill the black, talents. It kills so much stuff in this meta, but it kills temporary lockdown. And there's 2 ways, right? One is you have it in your hand and you just play it and kill temporary lockdown, get all your stuff back, wait till their end step, because then they can't kill your stuff except with instant speed, and your creatures will come back at their end step, and then you'll untap, and your creatures will no longer have summoning sickness. The other way is you just play this, hold up 1 green mana if you know they have temporary lockdown, and they can never play it. Because if they ever play it, you just pay the 1 mana, kill it. The triggers and temporary lockdown won't even go off. Absolutely insane. Also, this can kill like mono red things like Bane Splitter and Monster Roll to make it not have trample while gaining 2 life. Very nice card. One of the best ways to deal with temporary lockdown. Canker Bloom, there's a few of these. This is like one of the better ones of this thing, the 2 mana creatures that you can sacrifice for 1 to kill an artifact or enchantment, or proliferate this one. You can put counters or something. Decent stats as a 3/2. It's a Phyrexian Fungus. Worth considering in some aggro decks, but realistically, there's usually better options even in Haywire. But, good to know it exists. Sometimes is the best pick. Patchwork Formation. Similarly, this is more niche, but is honestly a reasonable card. It's a new card from Bloomburrow. 2 mana, instant. You choose 1. Destroy target enchantment, obviously, an instant speed. Just nice. Destroy target creature with flying. Hit the main thing that's killing you these days, right? Not bad. And the last chapter is the reason why it's reasonable, is if you don't have something to hit, you can filter it, draw a card, discard this, while creating a food token, so get a little benefit. So never dead, therefore reasonable. Tranquil Throwback was a great card last season. I've seen it less because maybe there's better options, but still reasonable. 3 mana dinosaur, 3/3. When it enters, you can pay 1 up to 3 times and do 1 to 3 of these things. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Goodbye temporary lockdown. Exile target player's graveyard. We are in a graveyard meta to some extent. Or gain 4 life. Help against the mono red. So reasonable card to consider as well. Although there often are better options in even green with Haywire Might or Scrap Shooter, which we'll talk about now. Nice new card. Raccoon Archer. Relevant types in Bloomburrow. 4/4 reach. Reasonable stats. There are better stats like the Hydra, but still reasonable, and reach stops the bird, or you can at least block it. And when it enters, if a gift was promised, gifting a card, so you're allowed to give them a card or not. But if you do give them a card, then you destroy target artifact or enchantment. So just blast a talent, blast whatever, blast temporary lockdown, get all your small green creatures back, and they get a card that might be a land, and it's probably not as good as temporary lockdown, while you still get this 4/4 out for 3 mana. So very, very sick, and one of the best ways to deal with it, especially in an aggro shell that can make use of a 4/4 Raccoon Archer. On to blue. Less options. We're getting to the less option colors, but still reasonable options. You can't kill enchantments, but what you can do is bounce it. This card, you bounce a creature, not your own, unfortunate, for 1 mana. Or if a gift was promised, you give them a tapped fish, so a 1/1 tapped creature, and it's a token. And if we do, then we can bounce target non-land permanent. So what you do is on their end step, after they took your creatures, you give them the tapped fish. It can't block. We bounce their temporary lockdown. They can't kill it really unless they have instant speed stuff or creatures. We get it's our turn. No summoning sickness. Swing in for that final damage. Very nice. Like in my skeletons deck, if you're getting beat by temporary lockdown, since we have blue, throw in some of these and we're off to the races. Machine Over Matter, similarly a bounce spell. It's only 1 mana for a non-land permanent if you have an artifact creature, so just a better one in an artifact creatures deck. And then Dazzling Denial. This just is the idea of counter spells. Holding up mana for counter spells can kill temporary lockdown. They can't get it down, as well as help with control decks, and blue gives you that, of course. We lost Spell Pierce, which is a 1 mana 1 to kill non-creature spells, which I loved. I would play a lot of aggro decks and just have 1 mana up. 2 mana is way worse, but whatever. And this one's cool because it's 2 mana. They have to pay 2 mana to get around the counterspell, or 4 mana if you have a bird. I love Mockingbird, so I often play this new counterspell. Additionally, remember you can bounce and then counter it on the replay, right? So if you can't hold the mana up, as if you have a bounce, you can bounce it and then hold 2 mana up later on to make sure they can't play it again. So definitely a cool way. You got, I mean, look, there's a good strategy in blue to deal with it that works. Talking about no options, black has no options to deal with enchantments. There's like a 5 mana sorcery that kills an enchantment. My God, talk about overpriced. But the good news for black is they have a lot of good mid-range creatures. So like Preachers, 3 mana, Sheldred, the 5 mana bat thing. We got some options, and obviously the more you have of those creatures, the less they get hit by temporary lockdown, which only exiles permanents with mana value 2 or less. So yeah, that's one thing. The other way, honestly, if you play low to the ground deck, like I play Skeletons and I play Ashnod's Harvester that have recursion that are going to get hit by temporary lockdown, your only option is kill your own stuff. Disfigure your own skeleton, your small skeleton that comes back, and then it's not under temporary lockdown. We can get it back later, because if you let it get put under temporary lockdown and you're playing mono black, you're just not getting it back. Not the best option, but the only one you have. Although, as I say, only option, there's this fun card that I've used before, and I'm actually making a deck to break it right now. I'm going to keep the strategy secret, but it's going to be sick. And this one does get around temporary lockdown as well. Most people don't know it exists. Ashnod's Intervention, 1 mana, instant, +2/+0 combat trick at instant speed. And when this creature dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, return it to owner's hand. So I used to use this with Imidane's Recruiter, and you could keep doing the enters the battlefield triggers. Honestly, this maybe should be played in the Fling deck, right? If you have enough black mana, because you can't get hit by all these exile spells people are playing, like the 1 mana white one. So pretty interesting, and you at least get it back in your hand. Yeah, if they want to kill and exile your stuff in a variety of ways, but including temporary lockdown, we can get back the one creature we want at least by playing this on it. It's like a self bounce. It will not go under temporary lockdown or ossification, or if it dies, you'll get it back. But it seems counterintuitive, but if you play this on a creature that's about to be temporary lockdown, you'll get it back in your hand. It won't go under it. Worth considering. More a fun one than a reasonable one in most situations. But mono black does not have options, so it is what it is. Red has 0 options as well to kill enchantments, but they don't need it because red's one of the best colors against temporary lockdown. In fact, the Slick Shot Show Off deck, the Fling deck that you see around, is exactly why temporary lockdown was not good until someone came up with this recent bunny token forge deck, and they use enough removal to deal with this as well. The reason being, this is not instant speed. Slick Shot Show Off will use a lot of haste creatures, combat tricks, will plot this, right, so that they can play for free later and kill you in 1 turn at instant speed. If you're just using temporary lockdown as your way to deal with things, which used to work against Boros Convoke, it does not work against this deck. So look, you can't really kill their enchantments, but you can win in 1 turn at instant speed, so just as good. So red should not have that much trouble with temporary lockdown. Colorless, there are not really options. There's like a 1 mana thing. You have to like pay 6 to kill an enchantment, and it's bad. I'm only putting reasonable things up here. But something that helps in control matchups, including against temporary lockdown, it's a mixed bag, is Lava Spore Boots, giving your things haste just for 1. It will get hit by temporary lockdown, but it'll survive other board wipes. They won't temporary lockdown just this usually, and you can put down your small 2 mana mill creature or whatever that's a 6/6, swinging for that final damage with haste. If you have a lot of mana laying in your hand, you can put this down and give a creature haste. Haste is just, like I said, very good because temporary lockdown is not instant speed. So even though it's hit by temporary lockdown, it helps with the haste strategy. So it's a mixed bag, but worth knowing that it exists. Finally, we're on to multicolored. Terra Sunder is 2 mana instant, exile target artifact or enchantment. All right, perfect. Gets temporary lockdown out of there. Not enough versatility unless you have black, but you can pay 2 more, including a black. If you do have black, which is why it's a multicolored, and then exile a non-land permanent. So, reasonable in those colors. Legions to Ashes is interesting in a token meta. 3 mana sorcery, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls, and all tokens that player controls with the same name as that permanent. So the bunnies, the fish, whatever. Get rid of multiple ones with this, and it can kill temporary lockdown. More niche, but sometimes worth considering. Ruthless Lawbreaker and Skyfish Spider are very similar cards in that when they enter, you may sacrifice another creature and kill any non-land permanent. It matters in Creature Matters or ETB decks or decks where you need creatures in your graveyard to reanimate, or an Insidious Roots deck. These actually are both in my Insidious Roots deck. I have an Orzhov one, check it out, with the bat. And I also have one that might be out or might not, where we're bringing back this with some fun tricks. And you obviously want creatures in your graveyard for Insidious Roots. So worth knowing they exist, can deal with temporary lockdown, and can deal with anything. Glissa, I almost didn't put this in, but you know, look, it'll do the job, right? And it does come up. 3 mana, you guys probably know this one, but it's a first strike, death touch, and when it deals combat damage, you draw a card, lose 1 life, destroy target enchantment, so you can get back your small creatures, or remove up to 3 counters from a permanent. The downside is they can just keep blocking, but if you do find a way to get it through, can sometimes deal with temporary lockdown. So I hope this helps, guys. Realistically, we're going to use some Get Lost, sometimes some Requisition Raid, some Haywire Might, or Scrap Shooter. We're going to bounce and counter. We're going to kill our own stuff or cry as mono black, swinging with haste, or do some fun tricks in multicolors. I make unique bangers. Remember to like and subscribe. Let's go, baby.